The Short Code Podcast is a proud member of the MedEd Media Network. Inspiration, information, and guidance on your journey to medical school and beyond at mededmedia.com.
Meandering in the margins of medicine, it's the Short Code Podcast.
Weird news,
fresh views,
helpful clues, and interviews.
By students, for students.
Subscribe to our weekly show at theshortcode.com.
I do remember once having this, he was a retired surgeon who was just angry at everyone, and there was a complication with a feeding tube in his stomach, and then nobody wanted to touch him though. And I just remembered I just went in there and turned on my charm, and I can't tell you what I said. By the time he left the clinic, he was smiling.
Now you are just cuter than a honey-soaked biscuit. Welcome back to the Short Coat Podcast, the show that gives you an honest look at medical school, a production of the University of Iowa, Carver College of Medicine. I remember that. I can't tell you how many people who I have met who have listened to the show and then they've come and interviewed here and been like, oh, I had no idea the show was done here.
It's like the first line of the show.
I mean, the first and the last line actually is.
This happens more often than you might think.
But to be fair, how many commercials do you watch where you're like, that was funny, and then you're like, what was the product?
Yeah.
Well, okay. That's...
You got to say it louder.
I'm the king of sebum, Dave Etler. But that doesn't matter right now because I've got some real live medical students here in the studio. Do y'all want to introduce yourselves using a cool moniker like I did? Like choose your own moniker on the fly?
I needed 3 days advance to be able to do this. But yeah, let's do it.
How about the stand-up comedian?
I was going to say all scrubs. Aline said, this is all I'm wearing from now on.
Okay.
Ever. They're amazing. I don't know why we wear anything else.
Aline, MD, PhD student Aline Sanduk, all scrubs.
I like that. Prego Jess.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've been pregnant for half of medical school.
You seem to have been.
That's a fitting moniker. And I'm going into OB-GYN, so.
Yeah. Jessica Dahan, M3.
Yeah.
Right? M3?
Almost M4.
All right.
You're basically an M4. Senior student.
Yeah.
That's what it should be.
Riley B. and Bush.
Stress Riley.
Stress
Riley. Because I'm always stressed.
I love that you started off with a consonant. So you're like, stressed.
I was going to say constantly stressed, but then I took it back a step to stress Riley.
Uh-huh.
You can see like the stress response.
Graying hair, Riley. Generally a happy person, but like stress is sometimes my word that I use for overall.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Mm-hmm. What about you, MD, PhD student Hannah Van Ert?
Oh, Lord. So first of all, I think I'm a granny Hanny. I've been feeling very old lady-ish.
Oh.
I've been knitting a lot. I've been sewing a lot, and I have 2 cats. So I don't know. I'm just embracing the 75-year-old lady life.
Mild urinary incontinence.
No, thank God.
Pelvic floor dysfunction.
Yes, I still have that going for me.
Excellent.
But thank you for putting that on the air.
You won't have an identity crisis when you're postmenopausal like the rest of us.
No, I'm.
So it's all good.
I'm fully identify as an old lady, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Keep talking. I forgot to do something.
Oh. Yeah, you had really cool art the other day. You posted something. What was your art that you just posted?
I was like, what are you talking about? Art? We were just talking about how I don't do art, quote unquote, don't do art. So I cross stitch. So it's like a form of embroidery.
Incredible. And it was stunning.
You should submit that for the art contest.
I will. I'm trying to con my mom into framing it for me. So, and I bet you she will. I just have to ask for it for a gift. But it's this I don't even know. I think it's probably 2 feet by a foot. And it's this beautiful Art Deco lady.
It looked like Mucha.
Stunning.
It's Alphonse Mucha, right?
Oh, that's a great question. I got it off Pinterest. I got the pen off Pinterest. There's a paired thing that goes with it. And the other lady's looking towards each other. So I eventually want to make her and then frame both of them in gold frames and then hang them somewhere in my house.
That would be incredible.
And just never stop talking about the fact. Anytime anyone comes over my house, be like, I made that.
That's my thing. That is the only reason that I want to get into DIY things is for the just absolutely unhumble brag of being like, yeah, I made that bench. Yeah, that shelf hung that. I feel such pride being the one in my household that does the carpentry. And by carpentry, I mean like nail in wall and
That counts.
general
That counts.
problem solving. I mean, get one engineering degree and you can feel like you can do anything. I cannot do anything. I got a hacksaw the other day. I know enough to know about safety, but not enough to know to go get the things that will keep me safe. So I just had a hand on it, sawing away on the side of a coffee table. It was chaos. I mean, absolute chaos. But I knew enough to know hand needs to stay away.
Were you a victim once?
A victim of a hacksaw?
No, this is not a hacksaw. This is a cryostat. So I was slicing placental tissue with a cryostat, and I did a very dumb thing, and I really bad cut. And then I refused to tell anyone about it.
What's a cryostat?
It's cold.
It's a deli slicer.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's not set up like a deli. It's basically a very, very sharp blade and it's a piece of machinery, and you can tell it how thick you want it to slice this piece of tissue. So it's capable of forming these very, very, very thin slices of tissue that's embedded in this like plasticky material. And I was trying to get the gunk off the blade with the paper towel.
Science term.
Yes.
Yeah. The science gunk.
And the science gunk. And I sliced my finger open, and I felt so embarrassed. And it was in the lab of a person who has an MD degree, like an MD. So instead of telling anyone about it, I started cleaning up and like trying to like get out of there before someone noticed that I was like profusely bleeding from my finger.
Yeah,
You put the bloody Kim wipes way down. And it's Kim wipes, so it's not very absorbable at all.
And he caught me as I was leaving the lab. He's like, "What's going?" Because I had it wrapped up really thick in a paper towel. He's like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "Oh, frick."
I just made an unplanned contribution to your science work.
I got to go to the blood center right now.
Well, in my mind, it wouldn't stop bleeding. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't exsanguinate from a finger cut, right?
What you just shared though is like the beginning, I feel, of so many Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Like you have powers right now you probably aren't aware of.
Oh man.
Placental powers.
Yeah,
Placental powers.
Yeah.
But anyway, I am. It's all.
You now have the power. Potentially, you now have the power to transform into. Because follow my logic here. You now have the power to transform into whatever you want because. Maybe there were some fetal stem cells.
Yeah, she actually, we didn't
there.
know she had a scar because she spontaneously regenerated.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
So-
over like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Spontaneous.
Hey,
Yeah.
you can brag here. It's okay.
So sorry, that was way.
Don't
off
look
topic,
up the turnover of skin cells. Don't look it up. It was fast.
but I eventually did stop bleeding.
Thank
Yeah,
God.
I just realized all of you are MD, PhD, MSTP track people. So I'm your least educated medical student.
Oh, no.
today.
I
wouldn't say
I would
that
not
at
say that. I
all.
don't think that's true at all. I just called myself Stressed Riley. I don't get stressed by knowing a lot of things.
Stress, Riley.
You have some pretty extensive training in momming,
Yeah.
obviously. So more than I.
I was telling Dave, Jessica asked me what my PhD was in, and I'm like, well, technically it's immunology, but you ask me anything about T cells, and I can't tell you. I don't think they're real, if you ask me. I haven't seen enough data.
Yeah, those are fighting words. I don't care, but don't let any of these other people.
It's funny because me
say
not
that.
knowing enough, I literally thought there was a theory that T cells don't
no.
exist. And I was like, what paper was that?
No, it's an ongoing joke in immunology.
There
It's a
is
preprint
someone.
study.
Not peer reviewed.
Yeah, not peer reviewed. Yeah.
There is someone in the department who Kevin, who complains a lot about some random guy, I don't know where, who thinks that macrophages aren't a thing, that dendritic cells and macrophages are actually the same cell type, just no one's ever caught the intermediary cell before they divide.
Oh,
And he gets real mad
for
about
me.
it. He's like, how dare, calling it a question, basically all of his work. But yeah, scientists, they're ornery. All right.
All right.
So that's
That was a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
You told us to keep talking.
You did, and you did great.
Again, need to be told we're doing great.
All right. I finally have what I was looking for. Josh called the SCP listener line at 347-SHORT-CT. You're welcome to do that too, listeners. He's in his clinical years and he has discovered a hack for grumpy patient interactions. Let's hear from Josh.
Hi, Shortcoats. My name is Josh Magoo. I was wondering if you guys could talk about little quippets you use to talk to patients that just make them laugh, or feel good or just sound like a person instead of like rattling off fevers, chills, shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, like a robot, like we're trained at times. Some things that work for me is, so my name's Josh, but whenever a patient's like, what's your name? And I always say Josh or Joshua if I'm in trouble. Kills every time. Or if you see a patient and you're like, oh, how are you? And they say, oh, about how are you? Or just say like, oh, well, I should be asking you that question, Or this is probably the best one. So if you ever have like a curmudgeonly, like 80-year-old lady and they're just pissed to be there for whatever reason, if you have any reason to like hold their hand, like you could say you're looking for cap refill or rashes or blah, blah, blah. But there's something about holding a patient's hand and then they just love you. So I've kind of collected a couple of those after rotating with attendings. I was wondering if you guys have any good ones as well. Make this process of clerk tips a little more bearable. Have a good one.
Thanks for calling, Josh. All of you have some clinical experience at this point, but Aline and Jessica, and especially you, Jessica, because you worked as a physician assistant long before you came to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any standard phrases that you use to put patients at their ease when you walk in the door?
Yeah,
do you do this?
I can't. He's definitely like on point. I can't think if I always had like a fixed phrase that I would use. But I try to turn on my Southern charm a little bit, and that does work, especially with elderly people, like he said. They do. They
walk in the room, you're like, Masters! What do we have here?
I do remember once having this, like, he was a retired surgeon who was like, he had I think a peg. This was years ago, and nobody else wanted to see him because he was just angry at everyone.
What's a peg?
Like a feeding tube in his stomach, and there was a complication with it, and he didn't want to drive out to where it needed to be fixed, and somebody just needed to do something for him, and nobody wanted to touch him though. And I just remembered I just went in there and turned on my charm, and I can't tell you what I said. It was more like how I said it. And then like by the time he left the clinic, he was smiling.
Now you are just cuter than a honey-soaked biscuit.
And everyone's like, what did you do in there? I was like, I don't know. Just turned on the charm.
Southerners are charming. You say what you will about the South, but they are adorable. I tell you, every single doctor, you're right. A lot of yas, like, we're just trying to help you. And a lot of like ins, just leaving off the G of like, well, what are you thinking? That's it, all of it. And it is immediately very disarming. Jess is 100% right.
And I don't have like a Southern accent, but I have family members who do. So I can turn it on when I need to turn it on. Kind of thing.
You can also use like sexism and misogyny to your advantage. Like when I was in the VA as a nursing student, you like the nurse would walk in.
I forgot that you did nursing.
Yeah. So you like your nurse that you were following for the day would walk in and be like, hey, I've got a nursing student for you. She needs to practice an IV. Like, what do you think? Can she practice on you? And the old Navy veterans were like, oh, I'll let any little pretty thing do whatever she wants to me. So you're like, one, you gross, but second, thank you.
Yeah. Like, I guess I'll just take
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. So until they start asking you weird questions about your personal life, and then you're like slowly backing out of the room.
You learn how to do that stuff for real fast. You're like, oh, well, we're done. Can't answer that question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You could make up details about your personal life. Just have them ready. Or make them up on the fly, right? I mean,
I'm such a bad liar.
Some nurses wear wedding bands just to avoid getting hit on. Because before 1990, I think that was the dead giveaway. They're like, oh, okay, well, can't come out of this one. So it's effective, I think.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of lines that like kind of yield from like misogyny or something that it's like, oh, I'm just the cute little girl. And it's like, nah, I'm also like, well educated and I'm here to do my job. But like when you're in the VA, it's just kind of like works to your advantage to get these patients like you. It's not great. I'm not happy about it. And I can't even think of like specific examples. But like there's definitely been times where it's like they'll say something sexist and it's just like, and then they're like, okay, well, at least they're not backing. I probably should, say other things, but
yeah, I don't know. It's not mean spirited. It's a little weird, but like you have to remember that the guys at the VA are relics from a different time.
It's like talking to your 80-year-old grandpa. Like you're not gonna be like, Grandpa, don't say that. Like,
well, and they like the ones that I experienced too, they were still very respectful. Like it was very much like, And they are of that generation that they tend to ask fewer questions or like doubt their medical providers. Like they are still of that generation that's like, whatever you say, doc.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, they do throw in some of that. Like, so sometimes you're able to walk in and
it's a thin line.
It is a very
really
thin line.
And it's really hard to articulate, but there's a moment where it crosses over from like folksy to like, okay, you need to stop.
Yeah.
Like, that's enough, you know?
That is true. And that's why it's hard to articulate, which is like, it's very situational, like these kind of interactions. And I guess we are talking about maybe the population that would walk on that fine line. There's also like a whole host of like, when you're in a pediatric clinic, like ask any kid about the toy they're playing with and they're going to instantly love you. Like ask any kid about any show that you've heard that kids are into these days. Coco Melon.
Like, who's your favorite Paw Patrol character?
Exactly. And so I think those things, like just learning about the kind of people you're working with and then like start asking them about the thing. That it works more so with children, but teenagers, ask them about TikTok. They would roll their eyes at me, but I'd be like, yeah, I'm on TikTok. I felt really cool.
Listeners, if you ask us a question, it means that I don't have to make something up to talk about on the show, and the show becomes what you want it to be. So send your questions to theshortcoats@gmail.com or leave a message at 347-SHORT-CT. We'll talk about it on the show.
So I really like Josh's idea of having a stock phrase.
I know,
so that
I
you're
do too.
prepped. I have stock phrases but they're not like funny. I mean, it's like I walk in the room and, you know, as the med student being like, you know, I'm here just to make sure we're on the same page. And yes, you know, Dr. So-and-so is going to come in and follow up, but I'm just here to get things started with you if that's okay. So they don't feel like I'm totally wasting their time. But that's not like a humorous stock phrase. That's just like a awkward initiation stock phrase to where they put up with me. So I like the idea of maybe starting it off with something more humorous, but I can't think of something you hit really good on like kids, adolescents. I'm like, and we talked about elderly people.
Yeah.
So what if they're like 25 to 60? You know, what do we do with that range?
I feel like I don't know. It's hard because it's not often the like intro phrase, but I think asking any person who has expressed interest in talking about their children, like that. I mean, I probably have gotten myself into like 5 to 10 minute conversations with patients that I had seen about their children. And like, they're telling me every ounce of their lives. And I'm like, all right, well, really happy we're having this conversation. This is not where I thought I'd go, but like, it is really interesting. And sometimes you learn a lot about those people and they're more likely to open up to you. And sometimes I'll come back in and check on them later and they'd like have photos ready to show me of their dog or their child. And so like going deeper into those personal questions, even though it's not necessarily your job and you don't always have the time, but I want a phrase. I don't know about the intro.
Gary Goldman has this amazing bit about being at the grocery store and having someone like cut in line, I don't know what, but he was like, if you want to get a bunch of old ladies on your side, just call them girls. He's like, come on, girls. And he just had this small army. Yeah, that's true. When I walk into a room and I call someone like young man or like young lady, like that immediately makes them feel better. They're like, oh, no one's said that in years. But like, I don't know, it's very sweet. So
I think that a quip that relies on the characteristic of the person in the other person in the interaction is a bit risky.
Yeah. It's very, you know, the problem is that there's not a one size fits all. I think that's what we're all getting at. Is like, you have to, like a good comedian, you have to read the room. Some people are not in the mood to joke around, and so you'll make a joke and it falls flat and you're like, all right to business. But then some people, I don't know, I try to let the patient determine that. Like if they start joking around, I'm like, all right, this is gonna be fun. So then we, you know, but it just depends. I
really think you should tell the story that you shared with me.
I don't know if I should.
I really think you should. Really think you should. It's a good story.
Do it.
I'll tell you what. Share the story.
If you don't like it, we can.
I will delete it.
Yeah, right.
I will.
Personally.
I will
delete it and then
I will delete it
undo.
if you, upon reflection, you have to give it the weekend.
Okay.
Upon reflection, decide that, again, it's not the best story.
So you guys remember in the first year when for the SPs they would have a day or whatever where they would bring SPs with like specific physical exam findings and you'd kind of rotate between the rooms. It's making me sweat just thinking about it. It's so embarrassing to look back. But you know what, audience, friends, I grew. Let me just preface that. I realize what I did wrong and I have grown beyond that. But anyway, one of the patients there had RA, like pretty bad.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, rheumatoid arthritis. So had like the swan neck finger and like I think Bouchard's nodes and things like that.
Misshapen hands. I'm translating.
Yeah, like
Good job, Dave.
Exactly. Like very I'm trying to use a non-valued word, but like fingers shaped in such a way that deviates significantly from the normal. Let's just put it that way. And he seemed really good humored. And I have this habit sometimes of when I look back on moments in my life that like were totally fine at the moment, especially on days when I'm feeling very self-conscious, I apply this lens of like looking for a bad thing I did and then beating myself up, about it for years. But I remember that we were joking around, and then at one point, all I remember is that we were joking around, and then I said something like, do you ever use your hands to like mess with people or like play pranks on people? And I remember that he laughed along with that. But then like my brain inserted a moment before his laugh where there was like a flash of discomfort on his face. And I was like, you fucking idiot. Like, why would you point out that his hands are so disfigured that he should prank people with them? And I feel
We've
so
all been there. Is this one of those moments?
Experiences of my life that I've done stuff like that.
Is
Like
this
where
really?
you just have a moment and you're like, I want to take the words back.
This was funny to me in my brain, but should not have been said out loud.
Or even just like I have these moments like distributed throughout my life.
Yes.
And I sort of think of it as just a layer of stupidity that's been sprinkled to an even 1/8 inch thick across my entire existence. Where I've said something that was just, or done something that was just cringe worthy.
Yeah.
And years later, I'll be sitting there like watching television or whatever, and it'll occur to me, and I'll be like,
Yes. Yeah, I've been there too. Or it hits you where you're like laughing at some character who's just so oblivious to themselves, and you're like, that was me.
yeah.
Oh God.
I mean, it's fine.
I'm sure he was like, this bitch, and then moved on with his life. I'm positive. It woke me up from sleep in the middle of the night where I was like, oh, put it on, throw it on the pile.
Right.
All right, let's start the whole movie of all the dumb shit I've ever said. But he probably moved on immediately. I'm sure.
If
Well,
he
see, that's
signed up for this job, I'm sure he did move on immediately.
Especially if he was like,
If it was me-
funny about it.
I know. If it was me, I would be like, first of all, I probably would have been using my misshapen hands to do pranks.
Like, what did you do?
Yeah.
You just broke all my fingers.
That's exactly the joke I was thinking. I was like, that'd be hilarious. You could have a TV show where you just did that all day long.
Or at Halloween, like that'd be the best horror house, like the best haunted house walking around. Oh my god!
I just think of like when you're around any child, like accidentally like running into a pole as people do, where they like try to hit their head, and then he's like, "Oh my god!" The possibilities are endless.
My
might I add.
my grandpa has these scars in his thigh, and when I was 6, he told me he got shot in the thigh, and so I asked him about it. Like 10 years later, I was like, "Hey, Grandpa, tell me the story of how you got shot." And he looked at me. He's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You got shot," and he's like, "You believed that?" It's like, yeah. I guess he had like osteomyelitis.
People do it. Elderly people are shifty. Yes. Thank you, Hannah.
He told me
They've
for
gotten
years
used
he
to
got
that.
shot.
We elderly people have gotten used to our deformities and our little physical issues,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I say it's risky, but
Look, sometimes it pays off big time. People are like, like on the worst day of their lives, they're like, I just laughed, everything's going to be fine.
It's true.
Right? But the
People who are in that space to use comedy to cope. Yeah.
some people
Yeah.
really do. Yeah. So I've grown. I've never said that again to someone, but yeah.
I wish, if you want to see Aline's face right now, and if this
I
survives,
got the 11s real bad.
if this survives the edit, if
leave
this
it in.
survives the weekend,
For the record, though, I think we could do a whole show of anonymous tips of just like absolutely cringeworthy things us as medical students have said to people.
Yeah.
Things I've said and done that you shouldn't.
listeners,
And
listeners,
that could be a whole thing.
support Aline. Support Aline and all of us who have done.
You're being so much cooler about this than I was expecting. I thought you were going to be like, ugh.
Did you really?
We don't want to be your friend anymore because it was so. Yeah. Anyway.
Support Aline and everybody out there who has ever sat up in bed in the middle of the night
And been like,
and said to themselves, "What the f*** is wrong with you?" to themselves.
I have
Call
times from
in
like
and tell us
4th
your
grade that I'm
stories.
doing this. Like I have moments to this day that I was a child. trying to figure out comedy, and it is forever ingrained in my brain how absolutely like scum of the earth person I was for a single sentence that I just vomited, and then I was like, I want to reel it back right away because I could see this hurt someone, and I thought it was going to be funny, and I now realize that is not funny.
Do you still get like the flush, like the hot cheeks and the hot ears? I get that, and I can't think of a specific example right now, but it's a very universal human experience that I think we all wake up in the dead of night.
We should all be more open about these experiences.
Speaking of that, the flesh, to go on an embarrassing...
Did you say speaking of the flesh?
The flesh.
Oh.
Of the flesh.
That'd be way funnier.
Experience.
No. So speaking of embarrassing SP stories, I was doing a standardized patient exam that we have to do to be graded. And at the end of it, the SPs often give you feedback. And in this experience, I often, as a person who gets embarrassed, like we all do, I get very flushed on my chest and up through my neck. My face is fine. My neck down is not. I often will wear turtlenecks to these events to avoid this specific experience. One, I've had like friends of mine call me out for it. Like they're like, yeah, you did really well. Like you look really red though. And I'm like, don't say it. But after this SP experience, she was like, honey, are you okay?
Aww.
And like, I don't
so much more
outwardly
embarrassing.
say it. Like, I'm not outwardly nervous. Like, my tone is usually fine. I don't have like a different vibrato, but like, I just get red. And she was like, are you okay? Do you need like a glass of water? I was like, I'm fine. Like, I didn't know how to explain to this person who is my patient, but is also not. Like, I'm really okay. I've forever been embarrassed now. And I will often wear turtlenecks. I'm probably red right now.
You are a little red.
Am I red right now?
Your body doing you dirty.
My body does me dirty. And when people call me out for it, suddenly I'm very sad about it.
This happens to everybody, I think, but in a less visible way. Sometimes even when I'm doing the show, which I do every single week, and so I should be used to, every once in a while I'm like sweating my ass off for reasons that that are not clear to me. But it's just something about being on stage or something like that, which is the situation that you're in when you're working with these
Your body
SPs.
betrays you.
1000%.
There was a guy in my first year of school that I started med school with that I remember in like one of our first few small groups, like he suddenly developed a stutter. And I remember I was just talking to him afterwards, and he, thank God, I didn't bring it up. He brought it up, and he was like, I don't know why I'm stuttering all of a sudden. I'm like, did you have a stutter before? And he's like, yeah, but like I went to speech therapy for it. I was like, maybe you're just a little stressed out. And he was like, but I don't feel stressed. And I'm like, your body is telling you you're stressed.
Yes.
Like whatever defense mechanism you put up to like train your body to stop, whatever the mechanism of stuttering is. I was like, those defenses break down when you're stressed in a way you don't even
Have
realize.
any of you had like the blepharospasm?
Yes.
Where
Oh, yeah.
like, I'm fine. No, really. I'm fine. My eyelids just, I don't know what's going on.
All through
1000%.
didactics.
Nightmare.
Consistently. And it was always because I had like, I was not sleeping. That's my trigger.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get the
Yeah. I got 2 styes in a row on my pediatrics rotation, one of which has not gone away and has turned into just scar tissue. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I don't notice it. If it makes you feel
No,
bad.
it'll like I get inflamed when my eyes get really dry, but usually it's like small enough that nobody really notices. But yeah, 2.
Feel it.
And I wasn't sure what was going on. Again, another embarrassing thing to have to text your head resident. Like, hey, I woke up and my eye is swollen shut. Like, I don't know what I should do. She's like, probably a sty, but you should go get it checked out. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just chaos.
I had to start wearing mouth guards at night because I noticed I was waking up and my teeth were sore because I was clenching. And I'm like, why am I clenching? Oh, it's just probably like the way I'm manifesting my stress.
Yeah.
And again, you think like, I don't feel stressed,
Yeah.
but your body is telling you like there's something going on. You know?
Oh, yeah. The adult acne comes rearing its ugly head in. It's like, you thought you were done.
JK,
Take it back.
LOL.
I take it back.
It's the deep, like,
the deep seated, the 3 weekers, the
Cystic acne.
the cystic acne.
Thank God. Going back to like why do you have to tell me this? Like, I have shaky hands, just at baseline. My whole family shakes like a leaf. Like, we drink our coffee in the morning, we're all like this.
Your whole family's surgeons too, right?
No.
Your floor must be a mess.
And no, but that's the thing. Like, we're all like, a lot of my family is medical-ish. So like my mom is an X-ray tech, so she used to start a lot of IVs, and I was an RN. And like I can do
all of our
fine
X-rays are slightly blurry.
They're like, no, she times it exactly right.
Okay.
But where I was going with this is I was doing a suturing clinic recently, and I know my hands shake, and I always tell people, because I've just learned that you just got to tell people, because otherwise they think you're nervous. And part of it is true. Like part of it is I don't like people watching over my shoulder. And so it's a suturing clinic, and she's watching me suture. It's an MD here. And as soon as she was done watching me suture, she stands up and she goes, so it's normal for your hands to shake, to like the whole class. And I'm like,
wow,
lady.
And she's like, there's ways to get around it. You know, like don't have a lot of caffeine or just exercise and eat regularly. I'm like, do you know who you're talking to?
That's
like,
don't exercise or eat.
She was saying eat right and exercise.
That will suddenly make your hands
and
stop.
don't drink caffeine. And I was like,
yeah, that's
again,
not going to happen.
Do you realize who you're talking to? But anyway,
that's good advice. Let me go get a coffee so I can really think
but
about
you're not alone. I was on an OR rotation recently. I won't say which one. And the fellow was going to hand off to a senior resident, and basically was like, "Show me your hands." And he put his hands out, and they were, trembling. And she's like, "That's not bad. Okay, here you go." And I was just like, okay, this is how we roll. This is like a common experience then. And it made me feel a little bit better.
It does make me feel better.
Well, because I think the thing, like I do a lot of fine motor stuff in lab, and there do things like if I know I'm doing a lot of like mouse surgeries that day or whatever, I won't have like the biggest coffee, or I'll wait until after my surgeries. But then there's other, and like,
that's not a thing that I could do.
Well, and I get a raging headache now because I'm addicted to caffeine. But I mean, there's also like adaptations you can do. Like I use a lot of like supporting hand gestures, or, you like take your time and use your breath and like all these things. And to have, I just was so irritated, and I'll tell you who it is later, but I don't want the world to know.
I'm gonna talk some shit.
She was just trying to teach.
But she did it in a way that I felt like was very kind of catty.
Oh.
And I was like,
it's that like observation.
Yes.
We'd always have like coaches that would do this, that would like see one player make a bad pass, and then it would be like a
learning experience,
team learning experience.
Let's make this into a teaching moment.
Let's make this into a teaching moment when it's very obvious that like it was like the one person's mistake, and now you're calling out the entirety of.
Well, and I know about it. Like I live with these things.
Speaking of lab stuff, pipetting into like 96 well plates. First of all, your eyes cross, and then second of all, it's just like it takes quite a bit of like fine motor skill to like make sure you're in the right well. And so I was showing an undergrad this new technique, and she had never learned it. And I obviously had my morning coffee because I'm not a psychopath. And I'm showing her now, I'm a little shaky. One, because she's watching me. Two, because I'm highly caffeinated because I'm a grad student. And I'm like, sometimes your hands might shake. It's okay. Like, just make sure you're guiding it into the right well, and just like keep track of it. I was like, do you ever have caffeine? She goes, no. And I go, good for you. Think you're better than me. And I was like, probably shouldn't have said that to her. Like, make her feel bad now for not having caffeine.
It's another cringe moment. You're like, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. Please, it's okay. You don't have to drink caffeine.
I didn't until med school. I got through all of nursing school without caffeine.
Good for you.
I know. And then med school started, and I was like, I'm never going to get through this. And now I'm completely addicted.
Yeah. I would have made the same joke, like, well, keep it yourself then.
Yeah.
You don't need to brag about it. But that's hilarious.
And then I took it back. I was like, oh, whatever.
And then
I was like, good for you, genuinely. Like, don't become me.
I've started like diluting. I do like half decaf now.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, like I'm still getting something, but it's not so potent. And then like, if I go without, I don't get the withdrawal headache.
Do that.
Like,
yeah.
I think that's
withdrawal headache is not so fun.
Yeah.
Or I'll get the overly caffeinated headache. It's literally,
because you're drunk.
It's a spectrum.
You're so caffeinated, you're like dehydrating.
Small therapeutic index.
But going back to what you were saying, the self-deprecating, I think that's kind of where Josh was hitting on with his comment of like,
Josh, when I'm in trouble.
He's like, Josh, when I'm in trouble.
Exactly.
And like, he'd make fun of himself. And that's the safe thing, because you can't always rely on like whether your patient's going to like take your comment the right way or not if you're joking. I've definitely had instances where I made a joke. I'll tell you mine. Are you ready?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So mine was, I had a gentleman who was a diabetic, and he was coming in for some kind of like lab test, follow up on it, and he didn't eat breakfast that morning because I think he really wanted to have good numbers or something, which you shouldn't do because he also took his metformin. So I'm in the room with him, And this guy is big. I mean, he's like at least 300, maybe more pounds. And he starts going down. And I was in clinic clothes. I was all like dressed up and my heels on even, I think. And I'm like, I guess I'm going all in on this. And I like grab him and he's like, all his weight is on me because there was no support. He was just in one of those like little rigid chairs. There wasn't a bed by me. And so I'm like holding him up. And then suddenly he comes out of it a few seconds later and then he leans forward and vomits and I dart out of the way. Right. And then I was able to call the nurse and we were able to, put some cool compresses on him, get a revive, get him, some orange juice, feeling better. And so then, about 2 minutes later, he's lucid. I have a conversation with him. And I'm like, okay, so he's like, what happened? I'm like, well, I think you got really hypoglycemic. You passed out. You threw up and vomited. But the good news is you didn't get any on me. He did not laugh at that. He actually was just like, wow, you just made me feel even worse. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. That was not my goal. I was just trying to make light of it.
But with the right patient, that would have killed.
I feel like for me, I would have laughed. I think if I maybe.
It's hard to tell because when I imagine that he was probably embarrassed.
Yeah, he was.
At his loss of control.
To throw up.
And
no one loves to throw up and be like, oh, I'm so glad that happened. But that's I thought where you going with it. It was like, but luckily you didn't get any on my nice new shoes.
Yeah,
it was I would have laughed at that. I don't know. Let me validate you. I thought that was hilarious.
I thought that was funny. I wasn't the one that passed out and threw up, but yeah, I did think it was funny.
Shortcoats, if you're enjoying our conversation today, I'd be grateful if you'd let people know by posting a story on Instagram or Facebook or tweeting about us. And don't forget to tag us in your post.
Thank
you. Self-deprecation can go a long way. It is disarming. But I do think if it's used too often in many circumstances, it can sort of cross a threshold into self-criticism that, I don't know, starts to affect how other people perceive you. So I don't know if that's going to be like, I've noticed, my technique is to, when I'm, this is not a good technique.
But disclaimer.
But this is what I have done in the past. And it is to sort of make fun of myself when I screw up. Mm-hmm. And I think what that does is just give people more permission to make fun of you for screwing up.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think I think if you do it consistently enough, it's like the sort of thing, like if you repeat something often enough, it becomes truth.
Gives them permission. Absolutely.
I think that's true.
I've seen that.
But my first impulse is to just make fun of myself because I don't know. It's just better than beating myself up. I guess
You don't take yourself too seriously. I think is a
do
great
not take
quality.
myself seriously.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Well, and I love this is kind of tying it, maybe not so like self-deprecating, but I do try to be very open with the like with science, it's a classic saying that it's like you become an expert when you've made all of the possible mistakes at least once or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell that to younger students as much as possible, or just like say like, oh yeah, I've done that before. Like it's okay if like trying to be very open with the fact that like
vulnerable.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is disarming.
Because a lot of people like, and I don't know, I don't feel it so much at this university, but every once in a while I'll come across a person who's really on their high horse about something. And I'm like, I don't like you because I guarantee that you are not this like perfect, like angel person. Yeah. And I don't know. So I do try to like tell a lot of younger students that it's okay if you like, it's okay to have these like wildly inappropriate things that in your head were very funny.
It happens.
It happens. It happens.
When those people fall, it is so satisfying.
It's so satisfying in a very petty way.
I don't want to precipitate it, but I like to be there for it. They're like, oh, oops, I am human. But like, it doesn't happen very often. But yeah, I love that, not being that person. It depends on who you say that to, though. Some people will not see that as the act of kindness it is. They'll be like, oh, so you're a up. Okay, good. Noted. And you're like, that wasn't the point of my story.
See, I want to be taught by a up because it's like, oh, that makes me feel like so much. That makes me feel willing to come to you and be like, hey, I up.
Well, if you're doing it to someone.
That is so true.
1000%.
That is so true. There is like a.
Like I up and cut myself.
There is like a real. Trend isn't the right word, but there's a strong thread in medical education of pretending that you're perfect because somehow it lends you credibility when you're teaching. And I think the better teachers are probably the people who use their own screw ups as a teaching moment, not the screw ups of other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Where they're making fun of them.
Right.
But, yeah.
As in your case, Hannah, your screw up.
Don't wipe medical gunk off of a very sharp blade.
I was thinking of your shaky hands.
Well, I mean, there was nothing more disarming than, I mean, as we all do, like you put one like part A into the part B tube and you know you shouldn't have, and you basically messed up the whole thing. And there was nothing like,
now the whole lab smells.
yeah, or something,
Or
just
you
like, or
wasted
you've wasted,
$1,000, yeah.
you know, 48 hours of your life or 2 weeks of your life because you've, you know, just made the wrong mistake or you labeled wrong or whatever and you grabbed the wrong one and your mind went so fast. Regardless, everyone makes these mistakes if you work in a lab and or just like in medicine at some point, you're bound to like grab the wrong thing and make like what is a pretty tiny mistake but feels very large in the scheme of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And like I went to my PI for the first time and I was like, hey, I messed up. I pipetted the wrong thing in the wrong well and now I don't know which well is which. And he was like, oh, I did that all the time. He's like, oh, I would do that all the time. Like I would do 2-week experiments and I would mess that up. Mind you, this man, like I have like a large respect for him too. Like in my mind, I'm like, you are very smart and I respect what you do very much. And so to hear that, like, yeah, I would do that all the time. Here's like a couple tricks that you won't do it in the future. And like, it was truly like the best teaching moment. I was never like embarrassed by it. Now I tell every undergrad I work with, like, hey, here's the mistake I've made. Here's the tool that I learned that helps me to not make that mistake again. Understanding that when you're pipetting into 96 little small holes, you're bound to like mess up where you are in the 96 little small holes. So like to learn that right up and to not have him be like, oh my God, you just wasted us 48 hours. You wasted us $1,000. Like, no, it's just like, yeah, I did that so many times.
If you're a PI working with
Principal investigator. I'm translating
principal investigator. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you're a principal investigator,
not a detective.
In some ways, a detective of science.
If you're a principal investigator and you're working with students who are less experienced than you, far less experienced than you, you'd better be budgeting for these sorts of
175%
mistakes.
Like however long it takes you. Yeah.
I mean, you know, don't try to make mistakes, but
even as like a grad student, like there's nothing more embarrassing than that like first mistake of like, I lost a whole sample and I just spent so much time and energy on this and I did one stupid thing and now I have to redo this. And so that like pain. And so to have a person that you can go to and be like, hey, made this mistake. And for them to be like, no biggie, just do it again. Kind of sucks for you, but like, you know.
The equivalent in the hospital, which I've seen, which is my pet peeve, is an attending will say something to a resident. Hey, I want you to do XYZ. Oh yeah, sure, got it. Attending walks away. Resident turns to the other residents, and I'm overhearing as a student, what do they want? I don't understand. What was the thing they're asking for? I haven't heard. And that makes me so angry because I'm like, why don't you just ask? Are you that afraid of like looking dumb? You know?
Yeah, I mean, this is
100%.
I mean, I would say that it's probably better. This is not easy to do, but I would say it's probably better to just act confident, including when you're uncertain. And by that, I mean, admit to your uncertainty. There's nothing wrong with that. And just be like, okay, happy to do that. Can you give me a little more information?
Yeah.
And just be like, yeah, I don't know that thing.
And I find that the really intelligent people you work with appreciate that. I was just on a rotation where I'll say shout out to the clinical microbiome rotation with Dr. Ford. I mean, that guy has good 20 to 30 IQ points on me. And he can just talk a mile a minute. And I would just stop him and be like, okay, I didn't understand the last 2 sentences you said. Can you please go back? Because there's like a foundation there that I'm missing. And you could ask him anything from a kindergarten level to a PhD level question. And he had complete comfort in answering the full spectrum, you know, for you.
How refreshing.
And I was like kind of wondering what my eval was going to be like. But he actually said, you know, she challenges things that come across to others as facts, you know, as a good trait. That it's good to be like, let me challenge the assumptions that are foundational here that maybe we're not all up to speed on. And I think that it's people who are really insecure with their knowledge base that don't like the questions is what I've noticed.
I think one really great way to do that, if you're not willing to just be like, hey, I didn't understand it, like a great way to do that kind of twist it is to say, hey, I just want to like reiterate what I think I got from that.
Yes.
Because I think that's a really, like, both of those are key to be able to like, hey, this is what I got from that. Tell me where like I missed something.
It's literally part of the American Heart Association closed loop communication guidelines, which you take a test on and say you're going to do, but then we don't actually see done that much.
Yes.
You know, I mean, in a code you will, and I get it's for those purposes, but
it is like a really good skill to be to actually ask
back.
when you don't know something, and or to try to resynthesize the information and tell it back to them. I do this all the time when, again, people give you ideas and research, or give you kind of tasks to do, that just be like, okay, so you want me to do XYZ, anything else that I missed? And they might also be like, no, you missed it. I wanted you to do ABC. And you're like, cool, thank you. Got it. I'll go do that. But I think it's a really great way. And like,
if they're
it's
smart,
okay to
they
fail.
would much rather you do that than screw it up, waste time because of your assumptions, or because they said it wrong, or you know, whatever.
And I like to subscribe to this idea of like little failures every day. Like, you're probably going to mess up a little bit every day. And like, for anyone out there that's struggling with the idea of like perfectionism, or just they are afraid to fail, like, go into a coffee shop, ask for like a beer, and them tell you no. Like, literally hearing that no and being like, okay, cool. Like, find ways in which you are literally going to fail. Like, find a way in which you can try to like ask a question that may like not be the greatest question ever, but like you're going to get an answer from it. So like, seek out those little moments of failure. I think for me, as a person who has like kind of worked her way through perfectionism to give a little bit less of a shit about herself, like, it's so powerful to just say, oh, I can go out and I can fail. I can give ideas to people that are way above my pay grade. And like, it might be a bad idea, or they might have thought about it like 3 years ago, but now I'm not so afraid to fail because I've done these other little things in which I've been told no. So it doesn't have to always be like, oh my gosh, I failed, I'm going to get fired. It can be, oh my gosh, I failed, and that's it. And it's not a big deal.
You know, I think the common thread that I'm getting from our conversation is like, what really helps is to frame it from the perspective of like, what would go wrong if you don't ask this question of like, hey, I just want to make sure we don't throw $10,000 away. So let me just clarify, you know, it's like, I'm not the up. I just want to prevent an inconvenience that would affect all of us. Right.
I tell you a situation that I feel like displays this well. Chernobyl. Have any of you watched that on HBO?
Yes.
I was obsessed with Chernobyl.
Such a good example of an institutional problem where you're just like, I can't override the hierarchy, and I know something's wrong, but this person wants to pretend like everything's fine, and then the problem just keeps getting worse.
Snowball.
Swiss cheese model.
Snowball.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I'm not sure that the Russians have learned that lesson.
The Russians are listening.
I'm just going to...
The government, not the people, for anyone listening who thinks that we're anti-Russo, you know.
Correct.
Yeah, the government.
Correct. Yeah.
Getting back to Josh's question of walking into a room and disarming people, disarming the patient.
I have an idea for him.
I think I do too. I want
right?
yours first.
So, did you guys remember the cartoon Mr. Magoo? It's really
does he have like the big glasses?
Yeah. That's the big cultural joke, is that he's very nearsighted, and so he wears these Coke bottle glasses. But like for older people who remember that cartoon, it'd be really funny when he becomes a doctor to be like, it's Dr. Magoo, not Mr. Magoo.
That would be
there you go.
To graduate, that could be fun.
Yeah, if you have an
that'll work
interesting
with
last name.
that'll work with the older folks.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That won't work with the TikTok generation.
My last name. So now being a hyphenated last name, some people could roll some eyes or just like, you know, say one or the other. So I see a world in which I'll go in and say, hey, I'm Dr. B. N. Bush. Call me Dr. B. and call me Dr. Bush. Call me Dr. B squared. Or just call me Doc. I don't care. That's it. And so like going through that, and so giving them options, because I always liked when doctors would be like, call me this. And I think it's very disarming. Or I'll be like, call me Riley, depending on the patient. And so I think that is a really good way, once you're to that level, to just like disarm people, and you kind of seem like the cool doctor.
I got one. So now that I'm married, my name is Dahan. And so in the military, the guys were giving me a hard time because my hands were like as big as theirs. I have like big girl hands. And so then when I got married, they were like, your name is literally Dahans now. And I was like, no, it's Dahan. They're like, it's Dahan.
Dahan.
And so I think like, I'll be like, yeah, my name is Dr. Dahan. I've got the great hands for surgery. I don't know, something corny. I gotta work on
love
it.
that.
But
Workshop it.
No, that's great.
I gotta workshop it.
So yeah, my last name is Van Ert, literally VANERT. So when I'm trying to explain it to people, I'll say like Van Ert. So you're driving a van, you slam on the brakes like Van Ert. And people sometimes think that's funny.
Another Dutch name, right?
It's a very Dutch name. Yeah.
My husband's Dutch.
Yeah.
Something I see a lot of hyphenated names doctors do is they'll just like, for you it'd be like Dr. BB.
Yeah.
So I see like there's a doctor at the VA I work with and he has a hyphenated name and it's just like people call him BK and I'm like, awesome.
It's so cool.
It is so
I know.
cool.
Whenever doctors are like going by initials, I'm like, you're so cool. I know. I want to be that.
I want a cool nickname.
I want a cool nickname.
Let's get married
I feel
right
like
now.
okay, so I don't think you need any of this stuff.
Dude, we've literally just spent
I was about to say,
5 minutes answering the question because you brought us back around.
I was going to say, well, I tried to bring you back around and you guys went off on your thing again. I'm just saying, like, I don't think you need any of this. Walk in, genuine smile, open up, have good eye contact, have good body language, listen carefully, mirroring. You guys know about mirroring, where you sort of adopt the
How they mime what
pose
they're
of the other
doing.
person. I mean, don't be
Just like
crazy about it. Just
They grab a tissue, you grab a tissue. Like,
yeah.
start bawling.
They vomit, you vomit.
but not on the shoes.
But not on the shoes.
yeah, that's awesome.
They are
The
delivering,
listen carefully thing. This is a tough.
That is very relevant.
Commitment. Wow. Oh, you got induced?
So many callbacks. I hope you are not just listening to this part.
The listen carefully thing I think is tough because now you got to sit down, you got to type in notes to a computer and stuff like that, which I think during a clinical encounter I don't know, that can be a little bit of a problem. I have seen people do this very effectively by, you need to take notes, wait until you've heard their story, and then you say, well, I need to take a minute to enter this into your medical record. Just give me a second. And then as you go, you can ask follow-up questions just to make sure that you understood what it is you're writing. And I think that act alone will go a long way to making the patient feel like they've been heard and they're having a good, a good clinical encounter. I mean, I was reading a 2018 study in the Journal of General Internal Medicine that found that it's common for docs to interrupt the patient after only 11 seconds.
Oh, it used to be like 13.
Yeah.
So now the average is going down.
Yeah,
And with some interrupting as early as 3 seconds, if you can imagine that. I mean,
Good morning. Hang on. Like, how does that even work?
I mean, I don't know how. Yeah,
it's crazy.
So just listening is, you don't need to. I don't know that you need to walk in with a quip.
Yeah.
You probably just need
Depends on
to.
the room, yeah.
I mean, again, you got to read the room.
So I was thinking, less about a quip, and my own personal family med doctor. I just love her because she walks into the room and she's always kind of like 20 minutes late because that's family medicine, but she takes the time and she writes down a lot of stuff on the piece of paper she brings in, and then she'll kind of do what you say. She'll take a minute, we'll talk, and she'll ask me these she'll spend a decent 5 minutes talking about how's school and not medical stuff at all. And then it'll kind of work into how are you sleeping? How are you eating? What are your concerns? And I just really love that. I love going to see her because she's very personable. She looks you dead in the eyes and she talks to you and she smiles and she seems genuinely interested in what you have to say. And so, for me, it's less about necessarily a quip, but more of these being interested in your patient. And
Right. Just asking about your patient's life.
I love that.
I mean,
That's
that
good
people
data.
like talking about themselves, number one.
Yes.
Yes.
And number two, helps you get to know your patient, which is supposed to be part of the patient encounter,
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's not just nice. That's valuable information because suppose they're coming in with palpitations and then you find out oh, you hate your job. Okay, let's talk about that.
Right.
Maybe it's not a heart problem you have, but your life is stressful. So
There's nothing that makes me feel more special when I go to a doctor and the first thing they do when they walk in is recall something that we've talked about years probably before. And so it's probably harder as a medical student to do that because you don't get as much continuity with your patients. Some do, and that's really awesome. But even then, there's sometimes notes, and you'll see, again, teenagers are easier, but maybe you can figure out what year in school they are. And so, hey, are you graduating this year? Like, and they're like, yeah, I've never met you in my entire life. How would you know have this information? I think it's cool to have taken that extra moment as a doctor, but also like as a patient to hear like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking about X, Y, or Z. That is so cool of you. And then I instantly respect them so much more.
If you don't want to take the here's the thing my doctor does. If you don't want to take the chance of quipping something and maybe having it fall flat, every time he walks in the room, he says, "You're looking well."
Thank you.
I mean, it's just a little thing. Like, you're looking well.
You know what I just thought about for teenagers?
Not TikTok?
No, well, TikTok's a great one, but something I remember I did this and then I never
Aline
did it
just
again.
starts flossing.
What?
Aline just starts flossing.
Aline starts doing a dance.
What?
Teenagers
We're
very
not
into
dentists.
flossing.
The dance.
Since you mentioned that, that's like it's paleontology. No one flosses anymore by the time it gets to us.
Yeah.
But the thing I've noticed teenagers seem to like is when you ask them what kind of music they're listening to lately, or TV shows. Did you see any cool movies lately? And then people will, sometimes they'll be like, no, and they're, all right, well.
Yeah, well, teenagers are a tough nut to crack. Yeah,
they are.
Hey, you got to go.
Oh yeah,
Just
oh yeah, I do. I have a Zoom call.
I have a Zoom call. This has become the Josh Magoo show.
Thanks, Josh.
Which
All for
I'm
you, Josh.
happy. We had I loved this. I had a whole bunch of other shit to talk about, but we didn't do that.
You told us to talk, and we talked. That's the point.
You did fantastic.
Hey, there was a lot of very valuable information we shared today. Oh, I'll tell you that story when we hang up.
Okay.
When we hang up the call.
When we
Podcast.
Okay, Grandma.
No, you don't even hang up phones anymore.
It's funny to get any valuable information from this episode. The listener must have listened to every moment of it. Like, you couldn't skip any of it because there were callbacks. There was just like pieces of information that we then circled back to in like 5 minutes.
This is a show. This is a show of no, he won't. This is a show of chaos. It's fine. That's our show. Hannah, Riley, Jess, Aline, thanks for being on the show with me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
And what kind of person would I be if I didn't thank you, Shortcoats, for making us part of your week? If you're new here and you like what you heard today, follow the show wherever fine podcasts are available, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Our editors are Maddie, Wallene, and me, I guess, because Nick graduated. Oh, God. The show is
You're looking well.
The show is made possible by a generous donation by Carver College of Medicine, student government, and ongoing support from the Writing and Humanities program. Our music is by Dr. Vox and Catmosphere. I'm Dave Etler saying, don't let the bastards get you down. Talk to you in 1 week. Hi, Shortcoats. Look, life in medical education, life in America, life in the world is often difficult. And I often wish I could help. All I have is this podcast, but in my wildest dreams, you have the support you need to lead a life of your choosing. You deserve to be happy, healthy, and successful in whatever ways you define those words. So if you need support because you've experienced racism, discrimination, harassment, mental health crises, I want you to be able to get the help that you need. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some resources that you can use. But the bottom line is that for what it's worth, I see you. I know you're out there. I wish I could do more. Maybe I can in ways that I don't understand yet or know about. But I see you, and I'm glad you're here, and other people are too.